Canadians expect us to secure our borders against those threats, so we understand the Americans will want to do the same thing.
Our government absolutely is not prepared. We haven't been. We've neglected border security and migration control for a decade.
19,000 illegal crossings, 2,000 missing border officers. Canada's northern frontier is a ticking time bomb waiting to explode. Are we watching the slow motion collapse of our national security? In this video, we expose the shocking truth about Canada's border crisis that Justin Trudeau doesn't want you to know. You'll see firsthand how terrorists and criminals are slipping through the cracks while our government turns a blind eye. Picture this: a quiet border crossing in northern Manitoba suddenly overwhelmed by a flood of illegal entries. Last month alone, this single checkpoint saw a staggering 500% increase in unauthorized crossings. It's not an isolated incident, it's a snapshot of the crisis engulfing Canada's northern frontier. Our northern border stretches over 8,800 kilometers, but you'd never know it from the pitiful resources dedicated to its protection. While the government pours money into southern border security, our northern flank is left exposed and vulnerable.
From countries that sponsor terror are known not to be our friends, come through the northern border.
And already we see the incoming head of the czar for border security and immigration enforcement.
The result? A skeleton crew of overworked and overwhelmed border agents trying to hold the line against an ever-growing tide of illegal crossings. The numbers are shocking. Border agencies are drowning, understaffed by thousands of officers. These brave men and women are pulling double and triple shifts, pushed to their breaking point as they try to stem the flow. But it's like trying to plug a dam with their bare hands. The flood just keeps coming. And it's not just the sheer volume that's alarming. Hidden in the crowds are individuals that should send chills down your spine. We're talking about special interest aliens. People from countries known to sponsor terrorism or pose serious national security threats. These aren't families seeking a better life. They're potential time bombs slipping through our fingers. How many of these high-risk individuals have we caught? The government won't tell us the exact number, but experts warn it's just the tip of the iceberg. For everyone we detect, how many slip through unnoticed, exploiting our outdated technology and gaping holes in surveillance? The total scale of this crisis is mind-boggling. In just the past year, Canada has seen over 19,000 illegal border crossings. That's more than 50 unauthorized entries every single day. Security experts are sounding the alarm, warning that we're facing the worst border crisis in 25 years. But this might just be the beginning. As we peel back the layers of this security nightmare, we're uncovering even more disturbing realities lurking beneath the surface. What other dangers are hiding in plain sight, ready to explode onto the national stage?
The northern border. Irregular crossings into the United States from Canada are on the rise, an issue Trump's new border czar says he plans to deal with the moment he takes office.
And they can afford to find a Canada to come across that northern border because they know a lot less fewer officers up here. In Thousand Islands, you can cross St. Lawrence River in 45 seconds.
You might think the biggest threat to Canada comes from the south, but you'd be dead wrong. Our northern border is a ticking time bomb, and the government's failure to address it is putting every Canadian at risk. The truth about who's really crossing that border will leave you stunned. Last year, border agents caught an ISIS fighter trying to sneak across our northern frontier. This wasn't some lone wolf, it's part of a terrifying trend. Terrorists are targeting our northern border because they know it's weak. They're exploiting gaps in our security that are wide enough to drive a truck through. Here's the scary part. Our screening methods are stuck in the Stone Age. While other countries use cutting-edge tech to keep their borders safe, Canada's still relying on outdated systems that might as well be powered by hamsters on wheels. We're talking about equipment that belongs in a museum, not on the front lines of national security. Experts are sounding the alarm, but is anyone listening? Tom Holman, a former U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement official, says our northern border is practically an open invitation for anyone looking to slip in undetected. It's like we've put out a welcome mat for terrorists and criminals. And it gets worse. Remember those special interest aliens we mentioned earlier? They're pouring across the border in record numbers. These aren't your average illegal crossers. We're talking about people from countries that sponsor terrorism. Every single one of them could be a potential threat to our safety. How many are getting through? The government won't give us an exact number, but security experts say it's way higher than we think. For every terrorist we catch, how many more are walking freely on Canadian soil right now? It's a chilling thought. Kelly Sundberg, a former CBSA officer, didn't mince words when he said Canada lacks a proper border patrol system. We're basically leaving the door wide open for organized crime and terrorism to waltz right in. It's like we're inviting danger into our own backyard. The most terrifying part? This is just the beginning. As our border security continues to crumble, the floodgates are opening wider every day. The question isn't if we'll face a major security breach. It's when. And when that day comes, will our government be ready to protect us? Or will they be caught with their pants down, scrambling to explain how they let this happen on their watch? While Canadians demand answers, Justin Trudeau seems to be living in an alternate reality. His government's approach to border security flies in the face of mounting evidence. But it's what he's not saying that should really worry you.
Well, on that point, U.S. border agents say they arrested 19,000 people trying to illegally cross into the U.S. from Canada in the past 12 months, and that's just in what they call the Swanton sector.
The good news is Canada and the United States has done this work together in terms of the Canada-U.S. border for decades.
The gap between Trudeau's words and actions on this issue is wider than our unprotected frontier. Just last month, Trudeau stood before the cameras and declared, "We're working closely with our American partners to ensure the safety of our shared border." But what does that actually mean? Absolutely nothing. It's just another empty promise from a government that specializes in feel-good policies that look great in press releases but do nothing to keep Canadians safe. The reality on the ground tells a very different story. While Trudeau talks about cooperation, illegal crossings are skyrocketing. Remember Roxham Road? That unofficial crossing point has turned into a superhighway for migrants, with numbers surging out of control. And what's Trudeau's response? More vague promises and inaction. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre isn't buying it. He's demanding the government shut down these unofficial crossings immediately. But Trudeau's too busy playing nice for the cameras to take real action. It's a pattern we've seen time and time again. All talk, no action. Security experts are pulling their hair out in frustration. They've been warning about these issues for years, but Trudeau's government has ignored them at every turn. One expert put it bluntly: Canada is not prepared to handle the threats posed by increased illegal crossings. That's right. Our own security professionals are saying we're not ready for what's coming. And it gets worse. Trudeau's government has access to cutting-edge technology that could revolutionize our border security. But are they using it? Of course not. Instead, they're sticking with outdated systems and inadequate training. It's like they're trying to stop a flood with a paper towel. The lack of a unified strategy is glaring. Experts are calling for a complete overhaul, suggesting we need to consolidate immigration and border security into one agency. But Trudeau's too busy worrying about his image to consider real solutions. The Canadian people aren't fooled. Trudeau's approval ratings on border security are in freefall. Canadians are waking up to the fact that their government is leaving them exposed to serious threats. The pressure is mounting for real action, not just more empty words. How much longer can Trudeau ignore this crisis before it blows up in all our faces?
The Trudeau government, or Freeland, Miller, LeBlanc, Bill Blair, this is going to be unprecedented pressure on Canada. We don't have the number of officers needed to adequately enforce our customs and our immigration laws at the borders, let alone in our communities.
Trudeau's inaction isn't just dangerous, it's potentially catastrophic for Canada's economy. Security experts are warning of a tsunami of illegal crossings headed our way. But the real bombshell? If we don't act now, the U.S. might slam the door on trade. The economic fallout could be devastating. Tom Holman, the incoming head of border security, isn't mincing words. He's calling Canada's northern border an extreme national security vulnerability. It's a huge flashing red warning that Trudeau seems determined to ignore. But the consequences of this head-in-the-sand approach could be severe. If nothing changes, we're looking at an explosion of illegal crossings. The current trickle could turn into a flood, overwhelming our already stretched border agents. And it's not just about numbers. Each unchecked crossing is a potential threat slipping through our fingers. Imagine this scenario. A terrorist cell exploits our weak northern border, smuggling in weapons or worse. With our outdated technology and gaps in surveillance, they could operate undetected for months. By the time we realize the threat, it could be too late. The economic impact of a major security breach would be staggering. If the U.S. loses confidence in our border control, they could impose harsh trade restrictions. We're talking about billions in lost revenue, jobs disappearing overnight, and entire industries crippled. But it's not just our economy at risk. A single successful attack could shatter our sense of security and change Canadian society forever.
And incomes for Canadians were higher than in the United States. Oh, how things have changed after 9 years of liberal taxes, red tape, and attacks on our energy sector.
We take the border very, very seriously, and that's why the border was the first issue that we discussed.
The social fabric that holds our nation together could start to unravel as fear and suspicion take hold. Experts are screaming for action, but their calls are falling on deaf ears in Ottawa. They've laid out a comprehensive plan to address this crisis before it's too late. The centerpiece? Consolidating immigration and border security into one streamlined agency. This would close the dangerous gaps in our current fragmented approach. The clock is ticking. Every day we delay puts Canada at greater risk. We need decisive action now to secure our borders and protect our way of life. The alternative is unthinkable. A Canada forever changed by a preventable disaster. Canada's northern border crisis isn't just a problem. It's a ticking time bomb threatening our very way of life. The shocking gaps in our security are an open invitation to terrorists and criminals. Every day we ignore this crisis, we're gambling with the safety of every Canadian. You have the power to demand change. Contact your local representatives now and tell them you won't stand for this dangerous neglect of our borders. Flood their offices with calls, emails, and social media messages. Make your voice heard at town halls and public meetings. Remember the chilling words of Tom Holman. The Canada-U.S. border is practically an open invitation to anyone who wants to slip through unnoticed. We can't let this invitation stand. Our government must act now before it's too late. If we don't secure our borders today, we might not have a Canada to protect tomorrow.